welcome to this week's Dementia Researcher Salon. I'm Adam Smith and I'm back from AAIC. Thank you very much though to those that have been covering the salon and have done such an incredible job of hosting while I've been away. Who's been covering? Jack did a great salon session, and we had Lewis, who did a great one on population health, and of course last week was Cleona did last week. But anyway, I'm Adam Smith and I'm back, and very pleased to be hosting today's session. And this session is all about books, the ones that have shaped how we think, taught us to work better, or simply shifted something about how we see the world. Books that have not just textbooks, but or research guides, but also fiction and biography, and really books that have left a mark on us. We're delighted to welcome back two speakers who've been in the salon before. We've got Rebecca Williams, who's going to turn their camera on now. Hello, Rebecca. And hopefully, still yet to join us will be Dr. Marianne Coleman, who's in Melbourne and hasn't said they're not coming. So hopefully Marianne will be joining us shortly. Rebecca, you all know so incredibly well, is a PhD student at the University of Cambridge with a background in Oxford, and a strong interest in science communications and crafting, and with her own brilliant YouTube channel, which I watch and give a thumbs up to videos all the time. So do go check that out. It's called, remind me, Rebecca?
It's Becky and the Brain.
Becky and the Brain on YouTube. Go have a look at that. Rebecca brings her perspective as an early career researcher, navigating academia as well. And as you all know, the salon works quite simply, where each of our speakers presents for 10 minutes. And then we have a chat and give you a chance as well to ask questions, or potentially, if you're interested, you can join us on the stage, turn your camera on and tell us about the books that have influenced you as well. But we certainly want to hear about those in the chat. So don't wait to hear ours. Do jump into the chat and make sure you tell us the books that you think we should all be reading too. But that's probably enough from me for now. We'll let Rebecca do your 10 minutes. We didn't get a chance to ask this, Rebecca, because we were chatting PhD stuff. Are you going to use slides today?
I am going to use slides. Yeah, I think constitutionally incapable of doing anything without slides. So I've got those ones. Hopefully you can see.
I certainly can. Well done. So over to you, Rebecca.
Lovely. Yeah. So I'm excited today to talk a little bit about some books. We're going to start off with things that are very, strictly scientific, and then gradually I'm going to go more and more off-piste as this presentation continues. So I apologize for how rogue it's going to get at the end, but hopefully you'll follow me through anyway. So starting out with a relatively sensible recommendation, Bad Science by Ben Goldacre is a book I have incredibly fond memories of. I think it is the first book I read in a kind of scientific mindset. It was recommended to me on a reading list, the kind of summer reading list before I started university. And it got me not only really excited about science, talking about some really interesting concepts like the placebo effect, but also about how we go about doing science. It really got me interested in the method, in the research culture very early on, in kind of engaging in the uncertainties of science, the kind of dubious nature of statistics, and how science can be used for evil, how we can shift and shape evidence to kind of tell a certain narrative. So as well, kind of shaping how science is used kind of in wider society and how it's perceived in media, which I found absolutely fascinating. This is just, I think, a testament to what really good science communication can do. Like I say, it got me so ready for my first year of university. And I still go back to it and read passages every now and then because it's just so funny, so authentic, and so full of good stories and interesting parts of science and the scientific method. So whenever I have students that ask me for book recommendations, I almost always go for this one, right up there with the classics like The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat by Oliver Sacks. They're usually my two kind of go-tos as a starter pack for students who are kind of 16 and up who want to start doing some academic reading. A kind of slight antithesis to that is this book, which I'm pretty sure, if memory serves, I read almost immediately afterwards and had a very different experience of. Now, I will say absolutely no shade to Steven Pinker with this, who is a fantastic science communicator in his own right. I've gone back to watch many of his videos since that are fantastic. They have, millions of views. But either I wasn't coming to this book at the right point in my life, or it didn't come to me at the right stage that I was at. Because again, I was reading this, I just turned 18. I think I was reading it by the pool, or trying to read it by the pool, I should say. And the memory that I have of it is just being met with an absolutely inscrutable to me wall of text. I just could not access this book at all. And I looked it up, and it was supposed to be for students. I didn't say what kind of students. That maybe should have been, maybe it was aimed at people slightly older than I was at the time. But the thing that I remember is just feeling really deflated. I was gonna go to university. I'd read this first bit that I loved, that had got me really excited, and then this just hit me like a ton of bricks. And so as much as it wasn't as kind of exciting an experience at the time, I think it nevertheless was quite a positive experience. And it really taught me actually that the power of not being able to understand everything, not having to understand everything. I do not think a lack of understanding of this book greatly impacted, my whole scientific career, or really negatively shaped the first year of my undergraduate degree. And so this book always stands as a reminder to me that just as it's important to be excited and confident about the parts of science that we love, to also be humble in the parts of science that perhaps don't quite scratch that itch in our brain. And this is still a book that is on my list to come back to, because I'm really curious what it would be like to read this now, kind of with that benefit of hindsight and with all I know now. Moving slightly away into less scientific books, this book is the one that has had the greatest emotional impact on me in my life. Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck, I think, is a book that most people encounter in exams. We look at it as a kind of it's a literary masterpiece. It's analysed in a very literary way. I did not come across this book first doing my exams. It was actually recommended to me by my dad when I was in my early teens, because he's a sadist, I think. And I remember reading it again on holiday. I was in Wales in a caravan, and it's quite a short book. So I read it kind of in 1 or 2 sittings. I was absolutely engrossed with it, then walked out of my bedroom in absolute floods of tears. And not to kind of spoil the book if you haven't read it, but these floods of tears were mainly centered around one of the central characters, which is called Lenny. And I think it's pretty fair to say that one of the crux of Lenny's character is that not only does he not have a particularly good grasp of the world, he's quite an innocent character, but also the world doesn't have a particularly good grasp of him. There's a real dissonance, I think, between how he wants to engage and understand the world and where the world comes to meet him. And the thing that this leads it eventually to, spoiler alert, quite tragic ends. And I spent a lot of time afterwards thinking, just being incredibly frustrated by the idea that if there had just been a character in this book who had sat down with Lenny, who had listened to him, who had, made some accommodations, tried to get everyone on side, that it could have had such a happier ending. It was so close to a much better ending, where they can ride off into the sunset. And I spent, many hours imagining these almost kind of self-insert characters who could sit down and be like, let's fix this narrative. Let's make it so that this world is better for you. And coming kind of back to this as a researcher, I think is quite poignant, because as much as there are many differences between the vulnerable populations that we work with as dementia researchers and the character of Lenny, I think there is this shared similarity, that there is this kind of misunderstanding between them and the world, that maybe they can't quite grasp the world in the way that they have been doing throughout their lives, but similarly sometimes I think the world struggles to understand dementia patients and the world that they're inhabiting and the space that they're living in. And so I think it's really nice now to kind of look back on this and look back on these imaginings, and see that, this is something I can have some impact on, listening to people to understand their world, and also as a researcher kind of shaping the world around them as much as we can to make it that more welcoming, more accommodating place. So yeah, I'd really recommend this book. I say it's I think the most emotional I've ever been reading a book. I have not tried to read it again since, because I don't think I could stomach it. But looking back, it was a really kind of big moment of realizing what was really important to me in writing those kind of happy endings. Getting slightly more tenuous still, I have found a real passion for dark academia writing. Again, if this isn't a subject that you're familiar with, it's essentially taking all of the kind of bounds of science and academia, but applying it to fantastical or historical contexts. So the Atlas Paradox is a book that I've read. It's part of a trilogy. I think it starts with the Atlas 6. And The Secret History, different trilogy, but same kind of genre, is one that's been recommended to me by my supervisor. And the reason that I love these are kind of, I wouldn't say light reads, but much lighter reads. They're kind of much more, let's say, fantasy genre almost, or at least the Atlas Paradox. And they're quite endearing and heartwarming because you get to see how science looks and how this kind of mysterious world of academia looks to non-academics, to the author, and maybe to the wider public. And it means that you get to come into it as an academic and see how we're represented as these kind of mysterious societies, whilst also recognizing the parts of academia that you do identify with, which is quite fun. It's almost like reading, fan fiction about a very niche subject that the rest of your family doesn't understand, but you can go, oh yeah, no, I totally get that. That's a vibe I can completely relate with. So yeah, I find them quite relatable in places, and it's quite fun to read these dark academic books and see how academia is represented, and find that camaraderie in these fantasy heroes that usually aren't scientists, I think, a lot of the time. And I did say we were going to get gradually more rogue. So my last recommendation, it does count because it is still a book, is The Dungeon Master's Guide. Now, I play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. If you've never played Dungeons and Dragons before, you've never heard of it, it's essentially a collaborative storytelling. So you sit around with a group of friends, they all play as characters, kind of individual characters that you build. And the Dungeon Master, one of this group of friends, which is usually me, plays as everything else. You build the world around your characters. You are all of the other characters you meet. You are all the adventures they go on, all the monsters that they will face. And so you're building this world kind of around your players. And I've been the Dungeon Master for my group of friends for just over 3 years now. And I talk with this about my partner a lot, actually, that there are so many skills that you can take from Dungeons and Dragons that are really genuinely quite applicable to everyday life and to working life. So from a kind of academic, kind of theoretical perspective, the campaign that I have been running for over 3 years is set in ancient Greece. And so I've spent so much time because of this researching Greek mythology, Greek culture, Greek philosophy, language. And this has given me like a really interesting perspective on looking at science. And it's something that has trickled into my work, is kind of using these ancient historical perspectives to view kind of symptoms that we still have today and concepts that we still have today through a slightly different lens. And I really love using that kind of historical vantage point now as a kind of jumping off point for changing the way that we think about certain concepts. And that started off as something that I did in Dungeons and Dragons. And more pragmatically, there's also this, general thing in Dungeons and Dragons that you are creating a space for your players to exist in. You are creating a space where there is, a good energy, where they don't have to feel silly, and where everyone can just kind of join together in this thing that you set out to do. And I think the ability to create that kind of space and welcome people into that space, in a space where they don't have to feel silly, where everyone feels welcome, is really valuable for seminars, for lectures. I don't have fear of running a panel when I've run a panel of a party of adventurers through a dungeon kind of thing. So I think generally for communication, for building welcoming spaces, I've genuinely found this really helpful, as well as, I don't know if anyone else deals with this, probably not, but I have slight perfectionistic tendencies. And there is a real balance between good planning and good improvisation that comes in Dungeons and Dragons, that I have learned the hard way, that letting go of the reins, sometimes you just get the best ideas and the best moments. So that, even though it seems slightly tongue-in-cheek, it is a genuine recommendation that Dungeons and Dragons can be a fantastic creative outlet, as well as improving communication skills. So bringing it back to perhaps a more traditional book for a conclusion, one of my favorite poems in the world is Our Deepest Fear by Marianne Williamson in her anthology Return to Love. And the kind of most famous quote, I think, in this book is this one, that our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. And I think that's a great quote. I think there's a reason it's perhaps the most well-known. But my favorite quote actually comes from the same poem, same anthology, but just slightly later down. And it's this one. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. This really speaks to me as someone, I think, as most people with academia who experiences imposter syndrome, who experiences anxieties. This is the best reason I think I've come across for trying to cope with that and trying to let that go. And that is that by kind of being authentic in ourselves and allowing ourselves to kind of enjoy what we do, we kind of give other people permission to do exactly the same thing. And we can produce these kind of really positive, hopefully, research environments. And it also speaks to me from a science communication perspective that I spend a lot of time talking to young children, older children, whoever will listen, about careers in science. And a lot of scientists, when I talk about this, they seem to get concerned that they don't want to do that because they don't have anything to say. And to that, my response is that for a lot of these young people, being a scientist isn't a career option because they don't know it exists. You can't open a door that you think is a wall. And so a lot of the times by going in and doing this communication, it almost is incidental what you say, because it's just your presence that is needed. Your presence alone proves there is a door. And so I really love this quote. I think it speaks to a lot of the way that I like to do science and the way that I like to produce kind of research cultures of people that are being their authentic selves, allowed to be their authentic selves, and in doing so allow for this kind of more positive environment where others can do the same and where we can be welcoming to external parties as well. So I'm going to stop talking now. Sorry if I've probably gone over, Adam, and very happy to pass on.
You didn't go over at all. And there's Marianne. Hi, Marianne. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you, Rebecca. And what a great way to finish off as well, rounding that back. Very, very well brought it back to something that was actually I'm impressed. I'm going to ask each of you this question straight after you talk, so we'll go to Marianne next, which is, how do you consume, when are you a reader? Are you a commuting reader? Are you a bedtime reader, or on a park bench in a pub?
Yeah, I think I am two types of reader. The first is I listen to audiobooks on my walk into work. I've started really enjoying doing that. But the other one is I am a bit of a fixator reader. So a lot of the reading that I do will end up like I'll have an idea for something and then I'll be like, ooh, and I'll wind up just kind of reading through pages and pages and reams of articles about things that are completely unrelated from my field of academic study. So a lot of the reading that I do isn't actually books, but a lot of kind of newspaper articles, research articles from completely different fields that I'll get onto just because I find it really interesting. So yeah, those are my kind of two modes. I really like listening to audiobooks on my commute. That's usually I'll kind of do fiction, like the Atlas Paradox, that kind of stuff. And then, yeah, my academic reading is usually complete rabbit hole reading.
I have to agree. When I started to prepare for this, when I got back on Monday, I was thinking, oh no, I should have made it a little bit wider than books, because we read so much more these days. I mean, you could just find that actually you do all your reading on Reddit, or you spend so much. I mean, and I listen to far more podcasts now than I do books, but it's not quite the same way, are there? I think one of the things when you're reading a book is that it's been very thoroughly considered. It's been proofread lots of times. Mm-hmm. It's not just something that's been pulled out of the air and thrown on pit, like my blogs. I didn't imagine my blogs are usually written from, I've had an idea, and it's written 45 minutes later. And I feel books are a little bit more considered than that.
I will neither confirm nor deny if that's how my blogs are written.
Well, the other thing I love about audiobooks particularly is that I found that I'm more open to considering things. Sitting down and actually reading a book and going and buying it and taking time out feels like something that I had to put a lot more thought and time into deciding, and a much more bigger commitment than buying an audiobook where I can listen while I'm doing something else. I never just listen to an audiobook and sit down and fully immerse myself in listening. I'm always performing some other activity. So I always passively do that. I don't know. Do you feel do you absorb it as much when it's spoken word as opposed to written word?
I don't know. It's something that I feel like I haven't sat down and read a book in a shameful amount of time. When I was up until about 18, I was an absolute bookworm. I would just devour them. Like I read out my school library. Like it was just, I would constantly have at least 2 books in my backpack at all time for when one ran out. And at some point, I think probably, with going to university and things got busier, I moved over to audiobooks. So I probably don't absorb it as much as reading a book. I think it's something that I keep having on my list of things to do, is getting back into like properly sitting down and reading a book. But I say it's just so much easier when there's, so many things that need doing and the house needs tidying, that you can kind of listen to it as an audiobook. One thing I cannot do is listen to it before bed. I've tried this so many times where me and my partner will try and listen to an audiobook before bed. I'm someone who falls asleep within like 5 minutes flat. So that's the one time that has been completely, I can't rule that out completely. Can't listen to them before I go to bed. I will hear nothing.
I agree. One thing I do quite a lot is, if I've listened to an audiobook and I've enjoyed it, I'll then buy the hard copy. Particularly if there's like a quote I want to find or a bit I want to remember, I'll buy the hard copy of it after I've listened to the audiobook. I don't know about you. What's been awful for me lately is, well, I say awful, it's actually been quite liberating, is a little advert for Spotify here. But Spotify have recently started including audiobooks as part of your subscription. And that's given me an opportunity to listen to a lot of things that I would never have previously consumed. I would never have gone and bought that book, but it's there, it's free, it's on Spotify. And that's really broadened my horizons to listening to a lot of self-help books and things that I previously thought I probably would hate.
Yeah.
That are all just there, and they're free on, well, they're not free, they're quite a Spotify subscription. Anyway, we should shut up and let's get back to Marianne. I realized, of course, because Marianne wasn't here, I failed to read Marianne's introduction at the start. So for those that don't know, I'll do this for Marianne. Marianne, thank you very much. I don't know what time of day is it in Melbourne?
It's just coming up to 9:30 p.m. and sorry for being late coming in. I had a conference email me being like, we haven't got your presentation, please upload it. And I'm like, oh my God, I need to actually make this.
That's okay. That's perfectly all right. Thank you for staying up late for us. So do you know what? I don't even know if this is up to date, because I feel like your career's progressed quite rapidly in the last 6 months. But this says you're a research fellow at the National Centre for Healthy Aging in Melbourne, with a background in orthoptics and vision science and health service research. And Marianne's academic path has been shaped by careful attention to both people and systems. Is that where are you still there, Marianne?
Yes, I am.
You are.
That is indeed where I'm doing my fellowship. So yes, it is up to date.
In that case, I'm going to show up now and hand over to you let's hear about your books. And I'll add, we'll put all these books together for you into a reading list at the end, which will drop into the comments at the end of the session. Now I know what they are. I'll make up an Amazon list maybe, or a reading list, or a Goodreads list, and I'll put them all in there for you to have a look at afterwards. So Marianne, are you using slides or are you just talking?
I do have some slides, but they're really just book covers.
Okay.
So
well,
yeah.
Do you want to share your screen?
Okay. Yes. Give me one moment to just actually put this up. And that also means that I have lost that window. So let's try and get that back again. Too many screens, not enough locations to put everything.
Before we get into that, did you know, I've pulled out some fun facts. A 2023 survey from Nature found that 68% of researchers said fiction books improve their ability to empathize with study participants. Apparently, so I'm guessing.
Yeah, there we go.
We've seen this quite a lot lately, haven't we? In dementia particularly, but lots of people living with dementia have become authors post-diagnosis. Written about their experiences quite a lot. Kevin Quaid comes to mind. Wendy Mitchell, of course, wrote some very profound books, particularly the last one where she was talking about being aware of coming to the end of her life. And Kevin Quaid's done a brilliant job in writing about his experience of living with Lewy body dementia as well.
Well, ain't it funny that is exactly one of the books that I'm about to recommend?
I'm going to shut up now before I steal your thunder. Over to you, Marianne.
Yes, I would definitely recommend Wendy Mitchell's books. I have read 2 of the 3. I haven't read her final one yet. I'm still don't quite feel emotionally ready for her last book yet. I don't know when I will be, but at some point I hope to be able to read that without crying too much. So yeah, basically Wendy wrote this. It was a while after she had been diagnosed. Wendy had already been writing a very successful blog, and a lot of the content of this book is stuff that she has also written about on her blog. So if financial constraints and such, these books are available in most libraries, so you can usually get hold of them without too much difficulty. But her blog is still up and available to read as well. So if you want a little bit of a snapshot of what to expect from this book, you can always go and check out Wendy's blog of the same title. So yeah, this is the sort of initial parts of Wendy's journeys, adventures, stories post-diagnosis, and she talks about how it all came about and the sort of initial experiences that she had that led to her receiving her diagnosis. But also she speaks a lot in this book about her advocacy activities and just her thoughts and perceptions on people's reactions to meeting her. She's got a lot of really great tidbits of advice to share about her earlier experiences of being involved in research projects as well. And so that's why I picked it as one of my books that have made me a better researcher. I certainly learned a lot from reading this when I was sort of quite early on in my dementia research career, really. So yeah, that's my main motivation for recommending it. So she's got 2 other books that follow this one, but this is a really good starting point if you want to just sort of be there for the very beginning of Wendy's story, essentially. So yeah, that's my first recommendation. And the other ones that I've got to recommend, some of them are kind of a bit, I don't know, maybe you might call them boring, but in terms of books that I found really, really helpful and therefore want to recommend, I've got a couple like that. And then I've got some things that are a little bit more lighthearted. So the next one that I wanted to share was this one. So this is not a dementia book, but this is my sort of boring book, if you want to call it that. This is the classic Broad and Clark thematic analysis. So when I did my original PhD, it was in very much quantitative research. I had not really done anything involving looking at people's experiences, and therefore I found this book, and this is the kind of the newest edition, to be really, really helpful for me in terms of getting my head around the whole kind of concepts associated with qualitative research and making sense of my data, and actually kind of the different steps involved in thematic analysis. Broad and Clark have written quite extensively on this topic. They are kind of you would sort of speak of them as kind of the sort of founding mothers of thematic analysis, although as they say in the book, they really don't have any kind of sort of claim on this term, but the book has some really great insights for anybody who's thinking getting started in qualitative research and wants to kind of be thinking about how to do it in the best way that they can, and with the data that they've got from the get-go, really, in terms of like that clarity and thinking about your data, writing it up, and going through that actual thematic analysis process. So that was my motivation for kind of sharing that as somebody who was very new to qualitative research at the time that I first started doing thematic analysis. I found that it laid it out in a way that somebody who was much more kind of about numbers and so on could kind of understand and make sense of, and the way it sort of steps everything through step by step, it feels a lot, the process of thematic analysis feels a lot less overwhelming when you've got something really kind of clearly laid out, and you've got loads of interview transcripts, you've got lots and lots of words to go through. It can feel quite sort of daunting getting started, really. So this book helped me to just kind of sort out where I was in my data and what I was doing with it. So that's my main reason for wanting to kind of recommend that. And it's not you don't have to have all the fancy whiz-bang software to do it. Just some highlighters and some post-it notes, as you can see on the cover page there, and you can get quite creative with it. We like books as a way of kind of getting us to think about things and sort of nurture that creativity. So definitely this book made me think, there's more to life than clicking codes in vivo, you know what I mean? So it just kind of helped me to kind of broaden my thoughts a little bit about this area of research, and I found it very, very helpful. So certainly I would put that as definitely a book that may be a better researcher, in addition to Wendy's book as well. So Wendy's book was kind of helping me to gain a little bit more insight into what it's like to be in the shoes of somebody living with dementia and taking part in a research project. And Wendy gives lots of examples of good ways that people have worked with her and ways that people have worked with her less effectively. And in the same way, this book here, it gives you ways that you can effectively work with the data that you've got to get some insights that are hopefully helpful to you as a researcher in your research career and in the projects that you do and the projects that you do in the future. So that's another book that I wanted to recommend. There are a couple of other sort of books in this kind of vein on this topic. I'm reading one about case studies at the moment, which again, having everything kind of laid out, especially if it's a new method that you're not super duper familiar with. I've got 2 books on the go at the moment. I've got one about case studies and I've got another one about documentary analysis. So these are new areas that I'm kind of developing skills in as part of my fellowship application, and I've got some great support from my team to help me gain those skills. But the case study book that I'm reading at the moment is actually being recommended by one of my team members. So not quite ready to share those books with you yet because I haven't finished them. Adam was sort of mentioning about when do you like to read, and I was actually sitting here reading one of these books in my office actually, and another researcher walked past and was like, "You have time to read a book in the office?" And I was just like, "Yeah, I'm straight." So there we go, folks. If you want more time to read, get yourself a fellowship. Then you feel like you can actually read and prioritize your development. So there we go. Anyway, that's what we've got for this book. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about some more general books. I was really happy to see Rebecca bringing up some sort of non-researchy books as well. So I've got a couple of my own to share here. So one of them is this one. Now this one is from a sports writer, actually, of all people. I heard a review of this book on the radio some time ago, and I wanted to check it out. So I borrowed it from the library again. I didn't really know whether it was going to be my jam or not, so I borrowed it from the library rather than actually buying it. And it was great because we as researchers are increasingly encouraged, especially in the area of dementia research as well, because there's such a strong component of what we do that involves listening to people with living experience of dementia and lived experience of dementia, and so this book really kind of resonated with me because it is about being a generalist rather than a specialist. So we as researchers are increasingly being asked to do more things effectively. So my original doctorate was in children's eye research, and then I moved into from a very sort of quantitative, measuring how people see things, kind of PhD into more general health services research. So it was nothing to do with eyes at all. And then from there into dementia research. So I'm very much a kind of jack of all trades, master of none in that respect. And that's why this book resonated with me. So I'm sure there's some people listening in who might potentially be new to dementia research themselves. And so I found this book a little bit of a comfort to read to a certain extent, because basically the author is just kind of going through all of the reasons why being incredibly specialist in one area might potentially not work out so well compared to being a bit broader in your outlook and what you're kind of doing. So this resonated with me as somebody who then went from doing more general health services research into dementia research, and then back into a highly specialized eye research unit, where the sort of the general stuff that I was doing about dementia and experiences of eye test was just nobody else was doing anything in that kind of area. There was nobody else that I could really sort of speak to about any of that. So a lot of the people in my department were doing lab-based research, discovery research, which is awesome and very much needed. But it meant that there was me sort of sat there with my very sort of general mixed methods kind of research skill set and experience. And, you know, I felt, well, I'm a generalist, like, how can I really fit in here? So, yeah, this book resonated with me because a lot of the key messages in it are about the perks, effectively, of being a generalist in a world that is becoming increasingly more focused on the specialist. So I feel like reading this book, it was more affirmation than anything else about the route that I'd sort of taken and who I am and what kind of resonates with me as a researcher, what interests me, and the way in which I'm able to kind of mold myself into different spaces that I find myself in. So I'm now in a healthy aging research center, and I'm able to take all of the sort of broad skills that I've developed in areas like, you know, making plain language summary videos and you know, laying out documents and things like that, and being able to actually kind of take that into a different space and still be able to make a helpful contribution to the area that I work in, and to be able to further my own research goals. So yeah, this book, it kind of opens with a couple of examples of chess grandmasters, for example, who are trained from a very, very young age, and they spend a huge amount of time learning various opening moves for chess games, and ultimately, what do they do when their career is over? What do they end up doing after that? And how, you know, there are some specialized skills that are very applicable to a lot of different kind of settings, right? So, you know, your ability to reason logically and all of the kinds of things that you are doing in chess can be really helpful in some instances, but also that people who are more specialized can end up being quite sort of set in their ways, quite wedded to certain ways of doing things and methodologies and procedures, and that can sometimes end up closing you off a little bit from what lies ahead, really, and being able to be agile and adapt to this changing landscape that we kind of find ourselves in. And you know, as we all know, as early and mid-career dementia researchers, like, the funding landscape at the moment for all of us is very, very difficult. You know, I have a fellowship, I've got funding for 2 years. After that, I don't know what's going to happen to me. And so this book encourages you to embrace, I think, that sort of generalist mindset and thinking about how you can adapt to whatever setting you find yourself in, and to open your mind, really, and be broad, and to actually kind of embrace more than just the one area that you're kind of focused on. And I think with the way things are now, and this increasing focus on work outside your discipline, collaborate with people outside your discipline, do things that are big and bold, and, you know, thinking broader than just, you know, what am I going to do inside my ivory tower. This book is a good one to look at because, yeah, he's a sports writer, right? A lot of the examples he uses are things like competitive athletics and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, you can sort of read that book and think, oh, yeah, okay, I can think of some people that I know that are like that. And maybe you might really kind of look up to those people that have spent years and years in just one specific area of research and become really, really good at it and really well recognized. But, you know, sometimes those kind of role models can feel quite out of reach. They can feel quite sort of, you know, you're looking up at them and thinking, oh, gosh, you know, they've spent their entire career doing all of this and now they're up here. How do I get there? And sometimes books like these can just kind of help you to sort of ground yourself in a bit of a way, and to just kind of recognize and embrace the talents that you do have and the things that you have done and all of these different kind of areas that you might potentially have the opportunity to work across, and to just kind of embrace those opportunities, really, and to not be afraid of them. So that was my main reason for recommending that book. It made me a better researcher simply because it was the affirmation that I really was quite needing at the time that I read this book, about the value of generalists, and that, you know, having a broad skill set, which is what, you know, when we're studying for our PhDs and everything, that's what it equips us for. It doesn't equip us to do a career of doing nothing but the stuff that we did in our PhD. It equips us to do all sorts of different things. And this book really kind of touches on a lot of those kind of considerations. So that's that one. And then I'm just going to go back to the beginning. So I skipped a book because Adam was talking about Wendy Mitchell's work. So this one's a little bit more contentious. This particular author is a bit take it or leave it in terms of their writing more generally. But I found this book to be quite hilarious, to be honest with you. So, you know, ignore the author if you're not a big fan of the author themselves. Actually, the writing advice itself, it's not gentle. It's not gentle in any way, shape, or form. If you are familiar with some of Chuck Wendig's other works, it is peppered with curses, right? You know, there's a lot of swearing in it, but underneath all of that and the kind of comedy value of a lot of the stuff that he's saying, there is actually some really solid writing advice in there. Just things like learning to kind of let go a little bit of the work that you're doing, and to be a little bit less caught up in some of the key parts of it, just helping you to kind of cut loose a little bit with regards to your writing and just feel what's the word, feel a little bit more free in terms of how you approach things, on the basis that, you know, there's nothing that you need to show to anybody if you don't want to. Now, when I was writing my PhD, I feel like I could have really used this book, because I would sometimes get incredibly knee deep in particular sections of my thesis, and just end up in this endless cycle of re-editing until I didn't really have much of a focus or an idea of exactly what the point was of what I was writing. And so, you know, the advice underneath all the curses, obviously, in this book is about just really kind of getting to the crux of the story that you're trying to tell. And we as researchers, we are increasingly expected to make our work more accessible and more readable to non-researchers. And so the book gives a lot of advice in terms of getting to the point, and actually being able to convey things in a way that makes it easier for people to follow. So yeah, it's, even if you don't take too much writing advice out of it, you might find that there's a few things in there that you sort of read and you go, oh, I do that. Oh, that hurts, you know. So yeah, if you want to be like ridiculously called out, if you're anything, you know, the sort of average PhD thesis writer, where, you know, you have some days where you write loads and other days where you write basically nothing at all, or you end up deleting half of the stuff that you wrote before, this book will resonate. It might give you a little bit of a chuckle. You might sort of put your head in your hands in despair and think, oh God, I do this, how can I stop doing it? But the title of How to Be a Writer Without Destroying Yourself, that bit of it is appropriate. Like, the writing advice is nothing in the way of gentle, but in terms of actually giving you some solid starting points for good writing habits, and being a little bit less invested in some of the stuff that you're writing, it can be a nice little wake-up call, really. So that is all the books that I had to recommend, really. So bit of a mix of comedy and, you know, affirmation and lived experience, and more practical research skills, really.
Thank you very much, Marianne. The very good selection. I completely agree. And there's a couple in there that I've certainly read, or the last one I do have on the shelf, but I've never actually opened it. I think I won it like a academic quiz once. But thank you very much. We're obviously running a little bit short on time. We've got 13 minutes left. I'm very interested to hear our audience's choices. What books have made you better researchers as well? I think Rebecca's gone to make coffee or something. I do have pre-prepared questions, which I'm going to pick up on. which is where do you both land on fiction versus kind of, guidebooks? Do you believe fiction can make you a better researcher? Because I'm going to get to my list and they're all fiction. I don't think I've got a real story in there anywhere. Where do you think? Because Marianne, there wasn't a lot of fiction in yours there.
No. I tried very much to sort of stick to the, what actually made me a better researcher. But it's probably worth mentioning that I do have like quite a strong background in creative writing. I mean, many years ago, but I did actually win some state level writing competitions in my youth. So I've always enjoyed creative writing, and I feel like sometimes. Again, Chuck Wendig sort of saying you don't have to show people stuff if you don't want to. You can just kind of get it out of your system and then do the official thing. But I remember my PhD supervisor writing a comment on my one of my chapters where I'd gotten a little bit too in the flow of things, shall we say, and I'd said that we were on a quest to do something, and she was like, "Oh, great! Are we going to kill some dragons? What are we going to do here?" So. Fiction books encourage you in terms of, I think, flow and telling a story. I think those are the main kind of things for me. And I do read a lot of fiction. I do read a lot of fiction that's not anything to do with any of that.
Literature was my undergrad as well, and I had to have that kind of flowery language beaten out of me when it comes to writing. I mean, you're a little bit close to this, Rebecca. Obviously, it's not that long ago that you did, GCSE English literature, or I don't know what you did at A-level. Probably not.
I did A-level English literature, English literature and French.
Did you?
Yeah.
Okay, well, there's a story behind that I think we need for another time. How did your writing style change? Did you find yourself moving more towards science books, or has that always been your thing?
No, I think it's always been my thing of, I get a lot of students that ask me, so why did you do English literature? I just really like it. So I think I've always kind of had these kind of parallel streams as much that I really enjoy science. A lot of my hobbies revolve around kind of media. I love like watching films, like National Theatre at home, like say audiobooks. I really love that kind of fictional side of things, and analyzing that in a slightly different way. So I think that the overlap I have always found between kind of, at least in this kind of analysis of fiction in the way that I do it now as almost a hobby, is that you analyze fiction in a very similar way to you analyze everything else. I think there's analytical transfer there that can kind of come over to science. You're just analyzing slightly different things in slightly different ways, but picking out, themes and what makes something impactful when you're reading it versus just another book. I think those are also all things that kind of transfer into kind of science kind of communication as well. And as well, I think that's just an element to me that I'm a better researcher when I'm not stressed out to my eyeballs. I'm a better researcher when I'm having a good time. And so to me, that also means reading things and kind of spending time, outside of my PhD doing things that are completely unrelated to my PhD in research, that hopefully do end up still having a positive impact on what I do, both through just kind of exposure to new ideas and also through just kind of better work-life balance.
I agree. Is there a book you feel you should have read and never have done that would, I mean, not necessarily, I mean, this is straying a little bit, I feel, probably from the books that have made me a better researcher. What about you? Is there anything there, Marianne? It's usually the classics, isn't it? It's anything like every single one of these cloth-bound classics that you can't see, actually, the camera's not angular. They're at the top of my shelf. Like The Remembrance of Things Past and The Odyssey and by Homer and things are all on my shelf. I've never read them. I can
talk about a book that I regretted reading because it was supposedly a classic. I read Atonement by Ian McEwan. They made the film of it many years ago. I was so bored. I just was like reading this, and I was just like, I do not care. I just do not care. Yeah, that was definitely a DNF, a do not finish. Did not finish.
So I did prepare a list of my own, just just which I feel I should mention. And I don't know if
Yes.
this is a judgment on me, that all of mine are science fiction or fantasy books, but that kind of follows in. So I had Altered Carbon by Richard Morgan, which I love because I did watch the Netflix show before I then went and read the books. And I love any of those things that kind of talks about mind uploading, and that your body is just a skin, they call about it as the, you know, you get reskinned and you upload your consciousness into different bodies. And so kind of a bit of a grounding in neuroscience. I think if Elon had his way, that'll be a reality in his lifetime. But it raises deep questions about who we are if our minds can just be stored and transferred into computers or into other bodies. So that was on my list. A Recursion by Blake Crouch. Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which is the book that was adapted for Blade Runner, which talks about what it's like to be a human in a world of AI, where, of course, is increasingly becoming a reality as well. I also have, this book is one I'm doing right now, Time Shelter. So this is slightly more relevant. So the premise is a mysterious clinic is created for people with Alzheimer's disease, where each floor is designed to recreate a different decade. The idea is to trick up memory. So we've seen that. I mean, that's reality. You get the memory boxes and you open up and music. Except the concept grows in popularity and healthy people start wanting to live in these places as well and go live into the past. And soon entire nations would rather live in the past as well instead of current. So it kind of it's grounded in reality, but as you can see, I'm listening to the audiobook version, and it's not very folded, isn't that cover, but it will get read, all the Time Shelter. And my last one, and I love this because this also does have a kind of a grounding in Alzheimer's as well, which is pretty much anything by Terry Pratchett. Has just not just influenced me as a researcher, but influenced me as a human being. His books they're funny, they're sharp, they're often absurd, but beneath that, they're kind of full of clever ways to view the world and a slightly different take on what is something, you know, that's real. And those things often last with me way after the books do. I mean, obviously we haven't had any new books for quite some time. And of course, he had his own, you know, he lived with the disease as well. But he had a way of making complex things feel like they were easy to understand. Big ideas like systems and ethics and identity. One particular book that I've just listened to because I prefer the audiobook version of this is Small Gods. This idea that you know, it's about belief and power and how institutions lose their purpose if they forget the people that they're there to serve. So, you know, God can be massive if lots of people believe in them, and then they become smaller and smaller when fewer people believe in them. And you kind of felt like research is a little bit like that. I'm going to go metaphorical now, that, you know, we get these big ideas and they're huge while lots of people really believe in them. And or you could say that if we don't keep the people, you know, if you were a god, as a researcher, you're a god, and if you don't keep the people with dementia in mind, or they don't buy into your ideas, or that funder doesn't, that your idea in you will cease to exist. And researchers are kind of like that. And he also had a great quote, which is, the trouble with having an open mind is that people will insist on coming along and trying to put things in it, which I quite like as well, which of course is what we're trying to do right here today with your book choices. So that's just an excuse for me I love forcing books onto other people. Let's see what our audience suggested as well. Rachel suggests The Creative Act, A Way of Being by Rick Rubin. It was easy to read in small chunks, so it wasn't about the PhD at all. But so many lines, I was like, yes, that's how I need to be. What else do we have? My colleague Jan, University of Western. The Book Loop, to try and bridge academia and reading chasm. Created your own book club, which I think is kind of like the journal club, but with books, right? I mean, we've tried to do that, although it's not exactly been very successful. Let's see, did Jack have any suggestions in his list? No suggestion. Oh, wait, Jekyll and Hyde, Lord of the Flies in there as well. Last chance to suggest your books. Well, I did, of course, do what we always do, which is to ask our friendly AI trained on dementia research and material to give you 10 top takeaways. And this is what it came up with this week. So number one, do not underestimate the value of fiction in shaping empathy and perspective. I think particularly if anybody working with dementia has time, go read any of those books written by people with lived experience. They may not always be expert authors that have got that kind of trained skill, but what they do have is they're really relatable. They tell real life stories, and they can make a difference. So even if they annoy you because they use certain words too often, or they're not written in a style that's so polished, they are beautiful books that really talk to their experiences. Keep a short list of books that have helped you and revisit them. Make time for reading beyond your discipline, which of course is what Rebecca said she does a lot too. Practical guides can offer useful tools for writing, planning, and working. So yeah, don't just rely on YouTube tutorials. Do dip into your bookshop or the online equivalents and secondhand bookshops. We have a massive bookshop where I live that's just full of secondhand books, and I often go wander around there and just pick random things from the shelf. Discuss books with peers to get fresh insights and recommendations. Number 6 is highlight useful texts to your student or to your mentees. Look for books that offer both inspiration and structure. Number 8 is treat reading as a professional development, not just as a leisure activity. Because if you're doing that, though, the temptation is to just jump into papers, right?
I think the other thing is that it's nice to have things that aren't professional development. I feel like it then feels like you're working outside of work, right? The minute it's professional development, I'm like, okay, so it's 7 o'clock. Does this count as work? Or like, for me, I like keeping them separate.
I agree. We've had another recommendation. Ellen suggests, And Every Morning the Way Home Gets Longer and Longer by Frederick Backman. That's a short story. I haven't read that one, but I'll look it up, Ellen. Jack's trying to plug Bernard Cornwall. I did get heavily into Sharp as a teenager, so I know Bernard Cornwall's books. Number 9 is not how books influence your attitude towards people and problems. And number 10 is try unexpected genres or authors for surprising insights. I couldn't agree more. Thank you very much. We're exactly at 1 o'clock to my brilliant guests, Rebecca Williams and Marianne Coleman, for coming along today and sharing the books that have made you a better researcher. If you're watching this on Catch Up, do drop a line in the comments to tell us what books you think are essential and that we should read. I will go away now and make a Goodreads read list for all the books that have been talked about today. And finally, before we wrap up completely, I am briefly gonna share my screen to briefly flag this. So I just want to let you know that we've got our Salon weekly webinars are booked now right through to the end of September, but we're going to mix up the format a little bit in October and November, and we're going to change around to have a fortnightly debate instead of our usual weekly webinars. We've done, by the time we get to the end of September, I think we'll have done something like 60 or 70, I think, of these webinars. We've covered a massive amount of topics, and I feel like you need a break. So we're going to mix things up a little bit with some weekly debates. Now, this is proper debate style. We're going to, lift from the Oxford Union and entirely rip off their format and every other debating format. And these are talking about some of the big questions. So we have a list. Scan the QR code if you're interested in joining us to debate on a topic, there is an existing list that you can pick from, saying whether you would speak for or against the House on those topics we've already had suggested to us, or you can suggest your own. These will happen every 2 weeks in October and November. Then we'll have a break in December, and then we'll come back with our weekly webinars sometime in January. So do have a look at the list. I think in there are things like, is the amyloid hypothesis done? Should we be focusing on prevention instead of biomedical research or cure? There's should academic papers be limited to 5 authors? Is the peer review system dead? Should research funding be decided by lottery? These are all currently in the list, but you can add your own as well. So do take a look if you'd like to come along and join us in the salon to be a debater. That's all from me. Thank you very much to, oh, one more suggestion. Oh, wait, you can't keep throwing them in there, Rebecca.
Sorry,
Lies of Mora is one of my favourite. Is it just you just telling everybody the books you like now?
Yeah.
I did the same thing, though. Thank you very much, everybody, for sticking with us and watching today. Thank you again to the incredible Rebecca Williams and the unstoppable Marianne Coleman. This is the Dementia Researcher Salon. I'm Adam Smith, and we will be back next week when we're asking, should you stay in research or go and do something else? I think you know the answer to that question. See you next Wednesday. Bye-bye.